Hello, everyone. It's Jennie and Laurie again of Astropath. And just as a quick introduction for those of you who might be new here, Jennie is an astrologer from hiddenpathastrology.com. And my name's Laurie Farrington. You can find me at lauriefarrington.com. And together we make Astropath. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Capricorn season. We're heading up into that time of year. The sun moves into Capricorn. We got a lot to talk about. So all of the information that you need about how to find us and where to find us, you can find in the show notes below. Be sure that you check out Jennie's meditations that she does on her website. She does one for each season. So anytime the sun moves into the next sign, Jennie's got a new video out, a new audio meditation out, and that's a really good thing to pay attention to. Right now, I have just put up on Etsy a little booklet for all the information you need for 2024, all the ingresses, all the retrogrades, all the eclipses, everything you need to know is in that little booklet, and there'll be a link for that as well. Anything else for you, Jennie, that you want people to know about? Oh, you've got a workshop coming up.
I do, yeah, I do. That's a good point. I have 3 in-person workshops coming up in January, so you can find the link to that in the notes below too. So it's yeah, so sign up for that if you want to do some in-person astrology. I still got some spots available. So yeah.
Great. If you happen to live in Vermont, you're lucky. Jennie's workshops, I'm sure, would be a lot of fun. If I was in Vermont, I wish I could join you. So,
Well, your workbook sounds good, so check that out too.
yeah.
So okay, cool. So we're talking about the sun going into Capricorn. This is always a big deal because it's also the solstice. Whether you live in the southern hemisphere or the northern hemisphere, the sun is moving north. So for those of us who live in the north, that means we are moving into winter, but that the sun is making its way back to us. And those of you living in the south, you're like, yay, it's summer. But you also have to be like, oh shoot, the sun's going north. So anyway, that's what that is. I mean, that's really I don't think I need to explain too much more of the astronomy, but just simply that the sun, the winter solstice, as we call it in the northern hemisphere, means the sun is way down at its southernmost point it will ever reach. And that's what it looks like from our perspective here on Earth. So I think that's all you need to know about that, right?
Well, that's why it's so dark all the time. This time of year is just so strange because it's dark by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It just feels like such a dark time. And one of the things that I just love, as I've gotten older, I've paid more and more attention to the solstice and really celebrating it because it is the moment when things shift. And as the days progress from this point forward, we'll have a tiny little bit of extra light every single day. And it's really shocking to me. Every year, it shocks me how quickly you start noticing that. And even though it gets colder and colder through January and February, we have more light. It's not dark, pitch black at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So, celebrate the return of the light. However you want to do it, do something, light candles, have a bonfire. I know where I am, Dave and I are going to, there's a big celebration on this island here where they have all the trails lined with candles and a huge bonfire. And, it really is a point in time to celebrate, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I know it really is a interesting interplay between dark and light, isn't it? Where it's dark, like you said, so dark, but you get that little glimmer of hope that it's coming back. So that's a nice thing to think about. So it also brings in the beginning of, I mean, this is Capricorn. So this is a lot of the significations for Capricorn we get from this very fact that it is one of the darkest times of year because this type of astrology originated in the Northern Hemisphere. So it's very much in line with the seasons. So right when it goes into Capricorn, it's a cardinal sign. That means we're at a cardinal point. That means we're making a cardinal shift into a whole new season. And that's what each of the 4 cardinal signs signify. So here we are in the Northern Hemisphere heading into winter. So Capricorn carries that archetype of the hermit, the need for solitude, the idea that you kind of have to go in and find some grounding and to settle into kind of those earthy things. I always think how Capricorn is the sign that represents the skeleton and the bones, you know, so you're going in with the bones. And so using this whole Capricorn season, I think, is about, you know, just kind of being with the bones, like, and noticing how your skeleton and what holds you up, the structure that holds you up, like how that feels and what that's like. And also, it always takes me into, okay, so this is a good time to connect with our planet, connect with Mother Earth, you know, and let your bones sit on her bones.
Wow.
That's kind of how I think about it.
Wow.
So,
I really like that. I wouldn't have thought of it that way. That's really great. You know, Capricorn's such an interesting sign, being ruled by Saturn, and it is so serious. And like you said, the hermit, and it's really, there is a need for all of us, I think, at this time of year to take time in solitude, to really, yeah, look at our connection with our body and with the earth and with, you know, what grounds us, what really holds us steady personally. You know, it's such a solitary sign, and we are, in our culture and in our world, we're so, you know, busy and active out in the world with other people, and yet this, one of the things that I love about Capricorn is its connection. In my mind, I feel like there's such a connection with personal integrity that you can't take your integrity from anyone else. You know, you can't say, well, I'm pleasing this person or that person, so I must be doing it right. It's like you've really got to go inside and find what integrity means to you. And I often think about the mountain goat that represents Capricorn climbing up the mountain. You know, it's not like it's, you know, holding the hand of the other mountain goat. It's on its own because it can only find that steady 1 foot at a time on its own. It can't be deterred by someone else's opinion or someone else's plan. It has to take those steps on its own. And I think, you know, one of the things about Capricorn in the natal chart anyway, you know, one of the things about Capricorn is Capricorn gets in trouble when it tries to incorporate other people's opinions. You know, it has to have its own steady footing.
yeah.
Its own belief and understanding of what that footing is.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's playing to the crowd and it can get really ugly.
Yeah.
Integrity, you know, you think about that mountain goat going up that mountain. If its purpose to get to the top of that mountain is so everyone will clap and say how great it is, there's a problem. So at any rate, I'm kind of blathering on here, but really being clear about what you're doing is for what you're doing, not to please
Yeah.
other people. I guess that's really all I needed to say, but
Yeah, and I think the key word that you're getting at there is Capricorn is the tyrant when it's out of balance. When Capricorn
exactly.
is doing it for everybody else, it becomes a tyrant, a dictator, an authoritarian, which none of us are thinking about at all right now. But anyway, but I also wanted to add, so Capricorn is the mountain goat, but it's also the sea goat.
Mm.
The sea goat is a mythical creature, of course. And what the designation of that is, it implies, like, when you look at a mountain, which I also think of as being Capricorn, the root of that mountain goes way down into the earth. And so the sea goat part of Capricorn means that it can swim below the surface and way down to the bottom, the basis of the mountain. And to me, that kind of is the internal phase of Capricorn, and like where you have to go in and deal with your own personal integrity, which to me means getting clear about who you are internally, so that when you move into the more external part of Capricorn, which is the part where you start moving projects forwards and you start delegating and you start kind of being the CEO of your project, you know exactly where you are internally because you've taken that hermit time to understand yourself. And now you're ready to move into the like, okay, now I'm the mountain goat climbing up to the top of the mountain. And that's more of where it's, because there is a social component to Capricorn, as it's solitary, but you also are going to be someone who's making things move forwards. You're a person who's going to be responsible for some progress. And the only way you can do that is to get other people's help. And that's where the delegation part comes in of Capricorn, like being the boss and then delegating so that a big project can happen. So that's why it's so important to go in first and get that part figured out, so that you're not being a tyrant, that you're actually being, you know, someone who can be a strategist and execute big projects and big ideas. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Good explanation. I like that.
Thank you. So let's talk about the season, shall we?
Yes.
A little bit.
Yes.
Is your cat climbing up the microphone?
No, I'm just knocking things around here.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Well, so do you want to talk about the season overall, or do you want me to?
I'll let you. I'll let
right,
you.
okay.
I mean, we can share this and just have a conversation about it.
Okay. Well, let's just start off by saying the sun moves into Capricorn, as we said, on the winter solstice, December 21st at 10:27 p.m. Interestingly, on that same day, the moon moves into Taurus, which I like because it's a very earthy start. It's a very earthy start to the whole season. And essentially the sun is quite busy. I mean, the sun makes contacts with lots and lots of different planets. The only two it doesn't make a contact with is Venus and Mars. So the sun is busy making the rounds. And just kind of in a nutshell, the first half of the season, we still have some Sagittarian, fiery, busy energy going on. And then the second half of the season, things slow down and get pretty serious after the new year. And then we have a couple other things going on. But Laurie, why don't you add in what you want to add in with that being said?
Well, it is really interesting how the first the first part of the season does have more lightness to it, and it gets more serious as we go along. We do have two particular dates. Do you want to talk about, should we go into that right now?
Yeah, let's do it.
So the first date that Jennie and I have really identified as a really serious, important date to look at is the 27th. December 27th. And that comes the day after the full moon. And there's just a lot of things going on. Just to tell you what they are, we've got Mercury, which is still retrograde, in a square aspect with Neptune. We've got the sun trining Jupiter. And then we've got Mercury conjuncting Mars. And there's just, it's so interesting. It's like, some suggestions of difficulties with communications early in the day, and then this beautiful trine from Venus to Jupiter, which is just expansive and lovely. But then right on the other side of that, we've got this, whatever that internal mental process with Mercury still retrograde conjuncting with Mars can bring up a lot of need to take action, or if you're not taking action, it can really bring in anger and discord. So, really, I think the way to work with that day, and given that it's 2 days after Christmas, the day after the full moon, many, many people will still be with their families, their friends, doing the holiday stuff. And I think the most important thing is to make a plan for that day. Don't just go into it blind. It's so easy, I think. Everybody's planning for, those of you who celebrate Christmas, which I suspect is a lot of you that are watching this. There's so many plans, so much stuff gets built into planning for Christmas. But then if you're still with family, the tendency is, we'll just hang out for the next few days. Well, I think that this particular year, this particular situation, if you're still hanging out with those people on that day, on the 27th, make sure you've got a plan. And we talked about some of the ideas of what would really work with that. And, I think really active engagement, not just sitting around watching a movie, maybe playing an active game or going for a big hike. What do you think about that? What kind of plans are you going to make?
Yeah, I am going to be with lots of family on that day. So I want to play a game. I want to make sure because with Mars in the mix, there might be a little bit of a competitive edge, and also because you have Mercury square Neptune, there could be some like kind of foggy confusion, whatever. But it might be that if you play a game, you might end up talking about some issue that you weren't planning on talking about and getting something out of the way. So I like that.
Right. And yeah, and with the sun trine Jupiter, really bringing a game that could bring humor into
Yeah.
the mix as well. It could be a day, if it's managed and worked with, it could be a day, like you said, Jenny, of conversations coming up that you didn't expect, and maybe conversations that could, under certain circumstances, be very difficult, could be really managed with humor and activity and awareness. So make
Yeah.
your plans for that day.
Yeah, and then the second date that we wanted to bring up is the very last day of the season, January 20th, because on that day, the sun conjuncts Pluto. And then right after it conjuncts Pluto, both of those things go into Aquarius. So we're going to be making an Aquarius season video that's going to include that because there's a lot going on that day. But with the sun conjuncting Pluto before it goes into Aquarius, there's some last finished detail you need to take care of that has to do with those Capricorn things, all those Capricorn themes we talked about in the beginning. Think about that. But there's something that is going to be like comes to completion and then it starts a new cycle. And we'll talk more about that again in that video. But that's a powerful day.
Yeah, and the other thing that you pointed out when we were talking earlier is that Mercury comes out of its shadow that day as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's an awful lot like, okay, tie things up and pay attention. I think it's a real day of, Aquarius is such a energy of seeing a bigger picture, seeing more into the future. It's really, wake up, pay attention to what's around the corner, pay attention to it's the beginning of a cycle between the sun and Pluto. Pluto moves so slowly that it's almost exactly a year. So if you can think back to mid-January of 2023, if something began that was really intense and powerful and, really intense in your life, that cycle that began at that point is done now. So this
Yeah.
is really a time, you could think of this as a time to really set an intention of bringing some real power into your life
Mm,
in some
yeah.
long-term humanitarian goal or something.
Yeah. So definitely watch our Pluto and Aquarius video for more information about that. But there'll be more to come.
Yeah.
But want to break down the weeks at this point or by the main
Yeah,
day?
let me just say, this Pluto, let me just briefly, like Jenny said, be sure to watch our Pluto in Aquarius video. And we made that back in the spring
Mm,
because Pluto moves so slow and it's doing this little dance between Capricorn and Aquarius right now. It went into Aquarius back in late March, mid-March, mid-March. It went into Aquarius in mid-March and stayed there until mid-July, June. It was
mhm.
right in that little pocket of time between March and June that it was in Aquarius, and then it backed back into Capricorn where it's been ever since. So this is the second time that it's going into Aquarius. That's why we made the video already a long time ago. We'll make sure there's a link there. Watch it again. It will be relevant again.
Yeah.
So yeah, do you want to let's open up the
Yeah, so
picture?
now we're going to break the season down. It's kind of week by week, but it's really based on the moon phases. So so once the sun moves into Capricorn, that's where the starting point is here. Sun is just about to move into Capricorn in this any second now.
Yeah, I kind of messed this up. This is one moment before the sun moved into Capricorn, but what we're talking about is once it's in there.
Yeah, and it's like 20 seconds later. So
Right.
so the first week is the first week is kind of, I mean, it's a nice little entry point. We're building up to the holiday for those of you who celebrate it. On the 22nd, we have Sun conjuncting Mercury retrograde. So that's the midpoint of the retrograde cycle. And then the very next day, Mercury moves into Sagittarius and really is like, bye, I'm going back into Sagittarius. And we've made a video about that too. A lot of stuff around what that means to go from Capricorn to Sagittarius. Essentially, it's about going back to get that inspiration that you might have forgotten.
It's so funny in this image, these two are just about to trade places.
Yeah, that's actually a
Yeah.
really good point. It's really so that's happening that day. On the 24th, the sun is sextiling Saturn. That's the second aspect it makes because it conjuncts Mercury, and then it's going to sextile Saturn. So that's a really nice opportunity for just making sure you're I don't know, I always think about just considering other people's feelings, tapping your sense of empathy, like, trying to just work with the soft skills. And that's a good thing to have because it's on Christmas Eve. So very, very useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the 25th is beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. The 25th, yeah, you've got that trine from Venus to Neptune. So that's a really nice. I just like right around the holidays, like just a lot of really nice aspects happening here. So I just think this is a good time to, when you remember that, to soften into the comfort, the support, the love of who you're with. So just as best you can if things are difficult. But I just think it's a really nice set of aspects. And then on the 26th, you have the full moon in Cancer. So now we're in Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, full moon in Cancer. Again, feelings, caring for people, thinking, being thoughtful, and maybe a little protective of your family members, but really just being in that more water flow space, which I think is awesome. Also can be sensitive. So
yeah, I think that whole those days leading up to Christmas, to the 25th, really do look beautiful. The only little rub in it is if you have not learned how to work with Mercury retrograde, there might be that anxiety because you're trying to plan everything and get everything ready. That's Mercury retrograde. If you know how to handle Mercury retrograde, this looks like a great lead up to the holiday itself.
Yeah, it's good. So that kind of summarizes the first little week there. Then we've talked about the 27th before as being that challenging day when Mercury scares Neptune and it conjuncts Mars, yet the sun also trines Jupiter, which really, I mean, in ancient astrology, that's absolutely the best aspect one can have. So sun trine Jupiter really helps kind of stabilize that day in earth signs. So, just tuning in. The next day, December 28th, Mars squares Neptune. That's a good challenge too. Like that kind of brings in, like, you want to take action really bad, but Neptune's like, on what? How? I don't know, It's kind of like throws up a fog.
and that kind of a fog, when I think about that Mars squaring Neptune, it's like, it's that period of time right between Christmas and New Year's where you really, you might feel like you want to get going, but you can't because everybody's still on vacation. You still have, all your plans for the new year. It's just things are not ready to move yet, and it can feel a little frustrating.
Yeah.
So I think that's what that is about.
Yeah. And then the next day, the 29th, Venus moves into Sagittarius, and it also sextiles Pluto that day. So there's some power available that day. Something
Oh,
about like
yeah.
that, I don't know, find a little bit of Scorpio stuff you have to do, like some of those deeper emotional topics or something like that. And then it's going to just go out into Sagittarius and kind of move away from heaviness and move into light. Um, the very next day, Jupiter stations direct.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I think Jupiter's been retrograde for a while. Don't have those dates at my fingertips, admittedly, but anyway, it's been there for a while, and it'll play in a little later. Once Mercury also stations direct, it's kind of like okay, everybody, let's move forwards, but that's a little bit later in the month. So anyway,
Yeah, and that's going to be more, that Jupiter stationing direct. Look at your own natal chart. And if you have planets right around 5, 6 degrees of any of the fixed signs, it's going to be more significant for you.
yeah, that's a good point. I'm always making that point about the natal chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then New Year's Eve is fairly quiet. New Year's Day, that is actually when Mercury stations direct. So now you really have, with Jupiter, the ruling planet of of the Sagittarius season that we just had, moving forwards, and then the Mercury stationing direct is moving forward. So that's that piece. And then Venus squares Saturn, which Venus squaring Saturn, I mean, that can bring in some challenges. But in a lot of ways, like Venus and Saturn kind of have an affinity for each other. Like Venus wants your relationships and your values to be stable, and Saturn can bring that.
I think this is just, it's New Year's Day. You're a little hungover. Yeah, you're a little hungover. You're not quite satisfied with where things are at. But yeah, it's not really that much of a problem. You can lay around and watch Netflix all day.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good. Yeah, thanks for bringing that into the reality plane, because that sounds about right. Oh, and then we have that last quarter moon on January 3rd. And, not a whole lot else is happening that day, but the moon will be in Libra. And I mean, this is kind of like, all right, you've had all your socializing, you've done all that, and now it's time to get serious. And now we're moving into the more serious half of the whole season, where it's just time to kind of settle down, buckle down, be willing to be solo. Like you've had all the socializing, now it's time to get to work.
Yeah, I like when we were talking about it earlier, the last quarter moon is about releasing. So you had said it was time to release the need to socialize. And I think that's so accurate for what this is. That's January 3rd, you're done. You're done. You're going to know you're done.
Yeah.
You're ready to get to work.
Yeah. And it's the astrology responds, because Mars moves
Right.
into Capricorn the very next day. And I tell you, Mars loves to be in Capricorn. It's considered to be exalted there. And whenever I see Mars in Capricorn in a personal chart, I always think, oh, this is somebody who knows how to get some stuff done.
Oh, yeah.
I know a lot of people with this, and they are all super productive and effective. And I'm like, damn, I wish I had that. But anyway, blah, blah. Well, so this little week here, now we're in the balsamic moon. So now the moon phases are winding down. And this little weekend here, I think, has some of the bigger challenges of the season as a whole, apart from those two dates we've mentioned. Because in this week, you have the sun is going to square Chiron, it squares the North Node, both in Aries. So there's some heat around, hey, there's some direction change you're going to have to make. And because Chiron's in the mix, it suggests some sort of healing or something. It has to be shifted in order to move. So I feel like during that balsamic moon, where the moon is dark, like this is going to be a good time to kind of do that solitude work and really get clear about what direction shift you want to make.
Right.
Yeah.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking about how you were talking about the sea goat. So this is the sea goat part before, after the new moon, you go into the mountain goat.
Yeah, I like that. Okay.
Yeah, as you're talking about it, it's like, yeah, this is the time that you really go into a solitary space and get yourself prepared.
Yeah.
The balsamic phase of the moon is such an interesting time. We really need to go inward and spend time alone. So yeah, keep
Mhm.
that in mind for that. That week is really interesting.
It is because I feel like with the squares to Aries, there might be this temptation to go out and do a bunch of stuff. And like, that's actually not it. It really is a no. Stick with the Capricorn component of, okay, I need to do the hermit thing this week and I need
Yeah.
to get some clarity around what's bothering me. What is taking some of my energy that I just need to heal. And then, yes, I'm glad you're drawing that in because I think the Mercury square Neptune on the 8th is part of this picture where it's like, okay, Mercury is now direct, or will be direct at that time. And the square to Neptune is like, you really need to think about the bigger picture. You need to
Mhm.
make sure that your plans are not selfish, that they make room for other people, other people's needs and sensitivities, that other people's suffering. Those kinds of things come into the picture. So I think that adds to it.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a real need to deepen your own mind into compassion.
yeah, I
Um,
like that.
yeah, a
Yeah.
good time to listen to music and read poetry and just do that kind of inward stuff.
Yeah, I like that.
But then on the 9th, what do we got there, Jenny? I love this.
I know. So the ninth is kind of like the bright spot in that week where you have the sun trine Uranus. That is kind of like putting your finger in the electric socket a little bit, where this is like not in a bad way, but in some way that you're really getting jazzed up about something. It kind of lifts this like, wait a minute, I have this wake up. I'm having this awakening in this area of my life. And it's funny how it's an earth sign. So it's like it's a wake up about how you can calm your nervous system or how you can do something tangible. I mean, that's kind of what I think of. But what do you think about that
Well, I'm
trine?
just thinking about it right after this other stuff and, that going inward and kind of, I think of it like you're doing kind of this inward work, you're meditating, you're listening to music, you're, really paying attention to compassion and all that stuff. And something out of that just brings this excitement and this awareness.
Mm,
And you're not going to really take action on. The thing is that a trine aspect, I always think of a trine aspect as a gift. So pay attention right around that January 9th. Does something spark your attention, or is there an offer made or something showing up that could really offer a new direction once we get past the new moon? I don't know. That's interesting. And
yeah,
to follow that right up the same day with what is it, Mars sextiling Saturn.
yeah,
So that really supports any actions, preparing for any actions.
hmm yeah. And it's interesting. That's the next time that Mars does anything with Saturn, it'll be a conjunction. So this is
Yeah.
a final little opportunity of some larger something in your life, some larger project or relationship issue or something like that. So that's a great opportunity for taking some kind of action that will create more stability would be one way to look at it.
There's a yeah, there's a few ways to look at that. That Mars sextile Saturn is really interesting because it's the closing sextile. So there's an element in it that's about release, but not just, letting go of something, letting go in preparation
Mm,
for the conjunction, like you said.
hmm
So there's
Yeah, an
some,
opportunity for
it's a
that.
great time for planning.
Mm. Yeah, I know I like those two together. I mean, because something when Mars and Saturn come together, there's combine the two principles. I mean, Saturn is slow and Mars is fast. So what it implies is the ability to take some sort of action for a much longer term plan, to compartmentalize, to break it up into something so that you can achieve something necessary in order to allow for a new cycle that's coming up down the road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And also the fact that at the time that this sextile happens, Mars is going to be in Capricorn. So it's ruled by Saturn. It's being ruled by Saturn. So those two are really in a very nice little relationships setting up a plan.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep thinking like, so watch the Saturn and Pisces video for more understanding of that, because there's a real understanding about topics like empathy and, bringing tangibility to your dream, like things like that. So check that out if you want more information.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think that brings us to the new moon in Capricorn.
Yes, it
At that new
does.
moon on January 11th, you take, all these Capricorn season things you're learning about, and you're going to plant a seed for something, your own integrity in some way, some alignment between your deep inner understanding and then how you're going to move something forwards, for the benefit of more people, of other people, or all people.
Yeah.
So
And we'll be making a video about that new moon as well.
yeah. So that kind of, and then that week of the new moon, you've got a Mars trine Jupiter. That's nice on the 12th. That's kind of like we just talked about Mars Saturn. Now at Jupiter, when it hits Jupiter, you get to see some of the rewards for those actions. And then Mercury goes into Capricorn. So it's going back into
Oh,
Capricorn.
yeah.
So
Yep.
that's that moment when you've gone back to Sagittarius, you've gathered up all that inspiration, that levity, humor, all those sorts of things, and now you're ready to fold them into this forward progress you need to make. So I like that.
I like this whole month actually so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. And
And
then
then
you
we,
have you Sun sextile Neptune there.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's a simple little pay attention to your intuition, your imagination. It's
Yeah,
a
like that.
sextile. Sextiles are opportunities,
Mhm.
possibilities. Write a song, write a poem.
I just love. And then we have the first quarter moon in Aries, on the 17th. And to me, okay, so you had that balsamic moon week where you had to get clear about what healing you needed to do, what direction shift you needed to make. Then you had the new moon where you planted the seed for that alignment. And now at the first quarter moon in Aries, you're going to have to take action.
Get to
Um,
work.
yeah, that is, whew, roll up the sleeves and go. Um, and then we just move into the final few days where we have Mercury revisit Saturn in a sextile, the final one of its retrograde cycle. The next day it trines Jupiter. So those are two really nice aspects for Mercury to make. And that's where you're going to be ideally finalizing something you've had a chance to go back and revisit and blah, blah, blah. And now you're sort of finalizing them and bringing some more stability, which kind of both aspects to me say stability because it's Saturn and then it's in Jupiter and Earth signs.
Yeah, if you think about it, the sextile to Saturn on January 18th, you're refining your plan, and on the 19th, you're really seeing the vision of what it can bring you. That's very nice. And then later on the 19th, what do we got there, Jenny? We've got
Well,
a little
Venus,
bit of a
well,
challenge.
Mercury trines Jupiter, and then Venus squares Neptune, which
Venus squares.
I think I said this is like Venus and Neptune are interesting together because it's kind of like, I always think of, Venus is when you're like, oh, look at that nice piece of art. Oh, I like that. And then, but Neptune is like, wow, that piece of art, my mind is blown, So when you put the two
Oh,
together, in a square, it's sort of, I don't know, it's interesting. I just think it's the possibility of really being enamored of some kind of transcendent thing that you notice, and something that really uplifts you, but you have to reach for it because it's a square. So, do you have any thoughts for that one?
well, I was just looking. So it moved into I don't want people to get confused because in this image, which is the image of the first day when Capricorn season began, by the time this happens, Venus will be in Sagittarius.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah, I
right.
just want to be clear about that. It's a square from Sagittarius to Pisces. Um, yeah, I think to me that's just the kind of things to pay attention to when Venus is squaring Neptune is not, you don't want to fall down some rabbit hole in terms of relationships
Yeah.
or if you meet somebody during the course of this month, and here we are at the end of the season, oh my God, this person is the most, like you said, that, wow, oh my God, this
Yeah.
person is it. I'm in love forever. Well, your vision isn't very clear when it comes to love or money or beauty at this point in
Yeah.
time. You're a little, you're just not clear. Your rose-colored glasses are on, everything looks lovely, but watch out.
Yeah, that's a
And
really good
not in a
point.
bad way, but just, yeah,
But the
paint a
potential for
beautiful picture.
delusion.
You know what it
I also
actually reminds me of?
yeah, what's that?
It reminds me of how when people smoke pot and they go off on some tangent, like, oh, this is the best idea I've ever had in my entire life. And they write it down, and then the next day they read it and they're like, oh, well, it sure seemed like a good idea last night.
Yeah,
That's what
totally.
this actually reminds me of.
Yeah, that is a great explanation of it, because that's exactly, it's like getting sucked into somebody else's delusion, or some way your own mind is like, woo, this is great.
Right, right.
And then later
And
you're like, wow, that is kind of dumb.
yeah, I mean, I think the
All right.
only the only way this can really get you in trouble is if oh my God, this is the perfect person. I'm going to go get married tonight. Okay, you're going to get yourself in trouble if you take some powerful action on something that you're thinking in the moment that is just a little overblown.
Yeah,
So,
and again, if this is happening on your personal planets, then you need to pay more attention. And that's what we say for all of these things. So you should be checking your own chart. Hopefully you have it, or if you don't, please email us. But
wow, this is happening exactly on my North Node.
oh, all right.
Yeah. So if you've got anything, in mutable signs right around 25, 26 degrees, that's what you want to be really paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Don't fall down a rabbit hole.
Yeah. And then we have the final day of the season, which we talked about in the beginning, January 20th, powerhouse of a day. So you really want to be paying attention and have your eyes pointed forwards at that point. There's several indicators that by that date, you really want to be looking forwards. You want to have done some healing work. And now for your empowerment, you want your eyes pointed forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
then we'll be doing an Aquarius season video around that time.
That's right. Okay.
So, okay, are we ready to jump right into the individual impacts for folks?
Now let's do it.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, we did have this. And yeah, take a screenshot of that if you want it, but better yet, go to Etsy and get the little booklet. I should have it here to show you, but I actually don't. It's a video, it's a download that you can just download and print yourself, and it's got all the information of everything you need for the coming year. So
Awesome.
now, for people with Aries rising, the Capricorn season is highlighting the 10th house. So we're going to keep this really simple and just think about what's the 10th house. Where's your focus this month? Your focus is on your career, your vocation, your reputation, all those types of issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to just have a handle on whatever. I guess it's really, you want to have a handle on your integrity, which you do in general in your natal chart. But during Capricorn season, yeah, take advantage of it to really get clear about what's happening in your workplace. This is all going to be, you're going to have some time off, right? Because, I mean, most likely, most people, I'm just going to say. So this is a great opportunity to really think about that professional life. Is there a direction change that you want to make, and then there's going to be some a real point of power at the very end of the season for you to think about. So that's basically it, right? I mean, it's
yeah. Anyone with Aries rising, you've got the cardinal signs on all your angles. So you're kind of a powerhouse anyway in terms of making things happen. And in relationship to your career, that's a serious area of your life. You take that area very seriously. And this is, every year at this time, as the sun moves through this house, you're really, these are probably the people that just make a lot of New Year's resolutions about their career, what the career is going to do in the coming year.
Yeah, and the other thing I would just add to it is just simply because Capricorn's an earth sign, notice what's happening in your body. Like, does your career, do you feel good in your body when you're thinking about your work? This is a good time in this time frame to think about calming your nervous system in relation to your profession. And I can think of a few folks at this, and that definitely brought that up. So yeah, so that's what you need to be doing during the Capricorn season.
Yeah. For some reason, I'm thinking about holiday office parties. I don't know why.
I know. It's hard not to think of a very specific person and what their life is like. But at any rate, this is all things to do with integrity in your profession.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important for people with Aries rising that they hold that level of serious integrity around their career and reputation. Okay, so I think that's pretty simple. And what about for people with Taurus rising?
Okay, so for people with Taurus rising, Capricorn season is happening in your ninth house. So let's talk about the ninth house for a minute here. The simplest way we talk about this is it's your worldview. It's your perspective that you gain through accumulated experiences throughout your life. So whether you went off to college, that would be one thing. Have you traveled a lot? That's another thing that happens in the ninth house. So those are all, also can be teachers, those teachers that you seek out. All of those are ninth house things. So during this Capricorn season, there's a highlight there. There's an opportunity to really work with your worldview, to make sure you are in integrity in your worldview, to understand, internally, what is your worldview? What are you feeling here? Where do you need to maybe make a little direction shift during this season to do with that worldview? And then that's essentially the focus, and then making sure you are in alignment with what you're doing, and that as you go around sharing your worldview with other people, that you really have an alignment with your inner values here. That's going to be super important.
Yeah, the whole issue, I love the ninth house, and it really, it's everything that supports and develops our worldview. So that's why, travel is in there, and education, and even religion, not spirituality, but religion can be in there. It's all these different structures that within which we develop and build our worldview. And with Capricorn there, it is so important for people with Taurus rising to have personal integrity. You can't just adopt somebody else's worldview. You can't just, be wishy-washy or, adapt to other people. You have to really hold a level of integrity in that area. And, with Capricorn season landing there, what it brings up to me is how you manage that in relation to the time. If you're with family members, do you avoid the topic of worldview? Worldview can bring up a lot of interesting conversations around the holiday table. But, you really have to hold that level of integrity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if you do the work, you're going to have a more social time in the first half, and then you're going to really be called to dig in right after the new year to really get clear about that direction shift that may be part of what this is happening here for you. Didn't say that very well, but anyway. And then towards the end of the season, you're really going to be wanting to take some action on some things. So making sure your integrity and your worldview are are lined up.
Aligned. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So we'll move on to folks who have Gemini rising. So this puts the focus of Capricorn season into your eighth house. And, the eighth house is one of those deep, intense houses that really, we talk a lot with the eighth house about the importance of boundaries, because the eighth house is about how we navigate ourselves in the face of other people's stuff, other people's values, other people's beliefs, other people's money, resources, all this stuff. But it's how we manage ourselves in navigating those things. So boundaries is really what it comes down to. What kind of boundaries do we hold in order to be able to support other people in their issues? So anyone with Gemini rising, you're kind of this, you think about Gemini rising as being kind of light and playful and a lot of conversation and intellectual curiosity. And yet when it comes to managing themselves in the face of other people's values, there's a real serious line. The integrity, their own integrity in dealing with other people is really, really important. So one of the things I would say you want to think about during this season is how are your boundaries? How are you managing yourself in the face of other people's baggage, so to speak?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's big changes coming at the end of this season. So you're doing your work there.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that anybody with Gemini rising, depending on what you do with your holiday situation, it means there's always going to be family stuff around the holidays, like the intense baggage of other people's values coming at you during the holiday season. And that's sort of like, you don't need astrology probably to tell you that for anyone. Like, it's kind of funny, but for this person in particular, for Gemini rising in particular, there is a real chance for some pretty intense issues. And as Laurie's saying, like, you've had a lifetime of working with those issues and trying to develop some kind of resiliency and good boundaries. And every year they get tested again at the holidays, right. So this Capricorn season is no different in that way. And it really is like the first half of the season is a little more lighthearted and a little more playful, but there's probably some stuff going on underneath. And then once you get to that kind of more serious second half, that's where you're going to really sort of see, well, how did that impact me? What kind of direction shift might I need to make based on whatever just happened in the lead up to the holidays? And then, as you said, Laurie, there's that big change at the end. Like, you've got to kind of make those internal shifts, and then boom, there's like a way to plant a seed for your empowerment at the end that has to do with all these issues. So yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Cancer rising.
So with Cancer rising, the focus during this Capricorn season, and every Capricorn season, is your seventh house of partnerships. And this is, let's talk about partnerships real quick. So really, partnerships are your spouse, possibly if you have one of those, your business partners, anybody you sit down into a kind of an equal one-on-one relationship where you're just kind of back and forth. A tennis match is going to be a seventh house issue. So all of those things play into it. The cautionary tale here, though, is that the seventh house is also a place where you project your own stuff onto your relationship. So that's also something that might come about. And I can see how, with depending again how you celebrate holidays or don't celebrate holidays, if you are somebody who you've got your partner's family coming into the situation, this would be a time where you need to really be in integrity. You need to be really clear that you're not putting your stuff onto your partner's family, let's say, because that's something that could happen. So during this Capricorn season, like, have some fun in the beginning. It's a little more lighthearted in the beginning part of it. And just, do your thing. And then in the second half, it's going to be more serious, and you're going to be looking more clearly at, like, ooh, how did that go? And making some evaluation and possibly making some shifts. There might be some demand on you to make a little bit of a direction shift in how you do partnerships. So,
That's interesting. Yeah. Cancer rising, being so, protective of the self with Cancer right there. And then this seriousness in relationship. And I like how you talked about, how I may be saying this all wrong. I may have heard you kind of strangely. I'm not sure. But just, thinking about how you're helping your partner at this time of year, supporting and nurturing from that Cancer area, bringing your own integrity to helping them manage situations with their family. I think you said something like that. But that kind of struck me as just, how you are responsible. You take a lot of responsibility, and how you manage your relationship has to meet your own level of expectations around integrity. So you're really working with that at this time. Your relationship is such a serious area for you, and that's where the focus is right now.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was just thinking too, like at the end of the season, there's that, Sun Pluto conjunction, and then the Pluto goes into Aquarius. I'm also realizing that this Capricorn season is an opportunity to bring something pretty powerful to a close in your relationship.
Huh.
That's going to be making a bigger shift. And that's, I guess, what makes this Capricorn season different than some of the others, is you really are using that sun energy to kind of close down this long chapter in your life about your integrity and how you are in integrity in your partnerships. So I think
And
that's what the direction shift is.
yeah, it's interesting. As you're saying that, I'm thinking, well, geez, if you've got Cancer rising, the area of relationship has been through a lot over the last couple of years, the last 3-4 years. There's been a lot of intense change and upheaval around relationship. And if you think back to the last cycle of the Sun and Pluto, think back to last year. What did you begin last year in relationship? And there's a new beginning this year, but it's kind of moving you forward. It's really closing down some incredibly important long range issues that have been going on for you in relationship.
Yeah.
This is really an opportunity to move past a lot of the difficulty. And if you've really worked with it with a great deal of integrity, you're really set up to go into an easier state, I would think, in terms of relationship, long range.
Interesting. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay,
Cool.
let's move on
There we
to
are.
folks who have Leo rising. So this puts the focus of the season into your sixth house. Oh, the sixth house. The sixth house is the house that really relates to how we care for our bodies, how we care for ourselves, our day-to-day routines that support us, self-care. That's how I think of the sixth house. In some ways, when you talk about it, it seems kind of simple. It's not like this big thing like relationships or career or, it seems simple. And yet you think about the fact that our routines, if you take all your routines and just toss them out, where are you going to be? That it really is, this house really does kind of undergird everything. So this is a time of really looking at how you take care of your health, how you take care of your day-to-day routines. And, thinking about, this is an area that's been through a lot of change in the last few years. And at the end of this period of time, there is some real release happening. There's something in this area that is really, it's going through some big changes. And you want to make sure that your relationship to your own self-care is that you're really in integrity with that you're really paying attention.
Yeah. It's interesting being a Leo rising person and appearing to be so kind of bright and shiny, you will just no matter what with that Leo rising, and then to have this very serious place for your routines. And I mean, maybe it's a little bit of the secret to your success in a way, that you've
Mm.
got to get really serious about these routines and take care of your health. And you know, as you get yourself to work, how do you handle that? What are the little nuts and bolts? Because this is kind of like where the rubber meets the road, this house, like
Mm.
all of the things that you do on the daily basis that support, your work, your health, really it is, as you said, Lori, it's a place you can easily underestimate. And
Mm.
during this Capricorn season, there's the first half of the season is a little more lighthearted in a lot of ways. It's just a little more, I mean, for the most part, focused on more social things.
Mm.
Um, and the second half of the season is when things are going to get more serious. And a lot of times that's when, I don't know about you, but that's a lot of times when people like, okay, I totally overindulged in the holidays. Like now I need to I'm going on a cleanse. I'm going to quit, my whatever, drinking wine, and I'm just going to take a break and all these things. And that's the kind of thing that might happen. But I also would say to you, Leo rising, like, if that's the sort of thing you really need to do to support your health, hell yeah, do that. But don't do it just because everybody else is doing it. Do what you really need. And there's something in this Capricorn season, in my opinion, that's about calming the nervous system.
Mhm.
Like make sure that you know where your ground is. Find ground. Do practices that help you get grounded. Those are all going to be things that help. And then at the very end of the season, we kind of have that wham bam of the Sun conjunct Pluto. And what was occurring to Laurie and I is that that's actually going to mark a pretty big shift, potentially for you. So the seriousness with which you've undertaken your routines and your habits, the degree to which you've done that is really good for you, is really going to support this new chapter in your life where something that you're doing about with your work is going to become more public.
Mhm.
Something is going
Yep.
to start, changing in the public eye or changing the public somehow. There's something in that. So take that seriously, do that work, think about a little directional shift you need to make, and then take advantage of that during this season.
I also want to just add one thing. As you were talking, I'm thinking, this person with Leo rising would benefit so much during this season. Get a few massages.
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
Seriously,
Yeah.
just connect with your body, give yourself that kind of a gift, lay on the massage table. Yeah, that's what I would encourage you to do. Okay, now we're going to move on to those of you with Virgo rising.
Oh, Virgo rising. So Capricorn season puts the focus on your fifth house. Fifth house is such a lovely house. It's that place where you just give of yourself. It is the place of that love that you just pour out for something that you love to do. So again, that can be creative pursuits. Like I think about fun, like art projects where you're just enjoying yourself, doing something colorful and fun and playful. It also can be a place where you're willing to take some risks, like in the name of fun, in the name of, enjoying yourself, you're willing to take some risks and do something that you maybe aren't used to doing. It also might be a time where you connect with a lot of children, because this is the place of children energy, that playful, in the moment, present tense energy is happening here. So Capricorn season really brings that into the forefront for those of you with Virgo rising. And during this Capricorn season, it's very likely that the first half is going to feel a bit more playful and light and social and chatty and moving around and seeing different people and so on and so forth. And then once you kind of hit that first week of January, there's going to be a need to really buckle down and get serious about your need for fun and play. I mean, if you're working on creative projects, that is a great use of that early January energy, is to just kind of be like, all right, what am I going to create? And use that Capricorn energy of planning, of, really considering what you want to do and lay out a schedule, get it clear what you want to do, because you can't create anything if you don't have a container to do it with. Like you can't do art if you don't ever go buy the paint. like so there's this idea that you really need to be the master of your own time here and set aside time to do whatever those creative things that are calling you. And that is how you're going to get to the integrity that you need to get to in this area of your life. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I think about Virgo rising Capricorn season.
I always think it's interesting, people with Virgo rising, just having Capricorn, serious Capricorn in the house of play and fun and, creativity. But I think, people with Virgo rising take those issues very seriously. Fun is serious business. It's not light, it's serious. I just always think that's an interesting thing for Virgo rising. But, this area of your life has been through a lot of effort has been put into this area in the last few years with Pluto, with all that's gone on in this area over the last 3 or 4 years. There's been a lot of change, and you're really, I think there's such a I think as we go forward and Pluto really gets out of that area, you're going to really be able to look back and see how much your creativity, your relationships with your children, your whatever that fifth house is to you, how you show love to others, you're going to really be able to see how much you've grown in that area. And this is a time to, just kind of pay attention, think about it. What is your level of integrity toward your own creative projects? What's your level of integrity toward your children? What's your level of integrity in the ways in which you show love in the world? It's interesting to have integrity show up, integrity and seriousness in the house of fun. It's kind of nice. I like it.
Yeah. It's such an important balance, though, because there's so many intense things that you could just stew on and brew on. But there is something about like the balance brought in by the playfulness of this fifth house, and so I think that Virgo rising and having Capricorn here, it speaks to that balance of like, you kind of do have to be deadly serious about humor and about having a good time, because otherwise it's just deadening. It's super important. And so I think that's what this one really shows, and that you are getting ready to make a big shift where something that you have been working on creatively for a long time is now going to become something that's more of a source of your work and perhaps your livelihood in a new way. So that's a big shift, and that's what makes this Capricorn season a little different from others for many years, is that there's actually this pretty massive switch that's happening as Pluto moves into Aquarius at the very end of the season. So use this time to get really clear about what these things are and where you're at and what things you want to close down and what new things do you want to focus on, so you can be focused on forward direction coming up. So
it's pretty interesting. Okay, so we're going to move now to folks with Libra rising. So this puts the focus of Capricorn season into your 4th house. The 4th house it's the area that speaks of our home, our family, and you can think of that as the house you live in. You can think of it as the people you live in the house with. You can think of it as your childhood family and home, or even, going back into your whole ancestral line. So that's really what the 4th house is about. And with people with Libra rising, that is a serious area. You are very serious about your home and family and how you manage your own integrity with those people and with that space. And I know you often, Jennie, also talk about the 4th house as land. And I think that's an interesting way to think about it. So during this season, at any rate, you want to think about how much change has occurred in this area of your life over the last few years. What changes have you made? How have you really worked with your own individual integrity to change this area? There's going to be such a shift as Pluto gets out of this area. You're going to be able to really look back and see how incredibly deeply you've changed this area in your own life. So during this period of time, the early part of this Capricorn season, it's going to be really, there's going to be a lot of nice family stuff, most likely for you. And then as we move forward, it's going to get more serious as you prepare for really being able to look back and see what changes you've made.
Yeah. It's funny as you're talking about, just thinking about Capricorn in general, just thinking about how Capricorn is that sign where one of the old adages is like, oh, well, when you're young, you're old. And then when you're old, you're young. And I think that little comment to me in the fourth house, it really speaks to like how long it takes to develop a serious taproot in your own life, of your own emotional taproot of like how solid and stable you feel. And I think that that's what this Libra rising chart shows with Capricorn there, that it just takes a long time to feel really grounded and clear about what your home is in the psychological sense. And then the physical sense, your hearth and home, I mean, you can think about, oh, geez, I'm getting a renovation, or there's some other thing going on with my physical house. But the reason why those things are so disruptive when that happens is because of how important this place is. So there's something about like, there's just a great opportunity here during the season to kind of enjoy the first half, be more lighthearted, and then in that second half, like just really, you need to take some time in solitude with Libra rising. I mean, you really need to take a moment and just really get a clear understanding of all the things that you said, Laurie. Like, how do you kind of stand alone in your home life? How do you have a real sense of integrity around family members? All of these types of questions. But really important, because at the end of the month, we have this switch over. Pluto is going to move into Aquarius as well at the end of the month. So you've got to think about in terms of like, what chapter do you want to close down so that you can really have a new chapter coming up ahead of you that takes you, where your taproot is solid. That's what you really are going for with Libra rising. So
yeah, that's really great, because that Pluto is going to be moving into your fifth house, really bringing empowerment into your creativity. I like thinking about that. Okay, so we're going to move on to those with Scorpio rising.
So for folks with Scorpio rising, you always have Capricorn on the third house cusp of your chart, if you're using whole sign houses. So just in a simple way, that just suggests that it is very, very important for people with Scorpio rising to be in absolute integrity with what they're saying. That means that they know where they're coming from, they know what they want to say, and when they say something, they mean it, and then they follow through on it. I mean, that is something that is fundamental to your personality. So ask yourself right now how you feel about that statement. How does that sit with you? That's an important place to start. This Capricorn season brings the focus right into that area. This Capricorn season is giving you an opportunity to go, how do I do in this area? What is going on in this area of my life? What is my communication like? And there's certainly quite a bit of suggestion that the first half of the season is going to be a little more lighthearted, a lot more social. You're likely going to be around people, perhaps some family and friends. And then the second half, like as that new year gets started, there's this much more serious kind of tone around what do I really need to be in integrity with my communication. Now bear in mind, the third house, it's not just communication, it's also your relationships with your siblings. It's your relationship with your neighborhood, your neighbors, like those casual contacts that you see. So those are also places where you're going to be, wanting to ask that question about integrity. Like, are you in alignment with your internal feelings and values? Are they in alignment with what you're showing to people like your siblings and your neighbors, and as you move around in the world and communicate? So that's the kind of the core question I think that's coming into play here.
Yeah, it's interesting with Scorpio rising, just thinking about that deep level of serious integrity around how you use your voice.
Mm.
And all of those relationships. And given that this is Capricorn season, this is the holiday season, one of the things that it makes me think about is what are you spending the holiday time with your siblings? Oftentimes as adults, the only time people see their siblings is at the holiday time. And this could really be quite significant if every year you spend your holidays with your siblings in some manner. Look back and think about it, because it's always Capricorn season during the holidays. And if you bump into difficulties with your siblings, well, you just really want to be clear with your voice and your integrity there. Also, it's really important that you think about how much this area has changed over the last few years. There's been so much going on in Capricorn for 3 or 4 years now. And as we end this season out with that real intense bit at the very end, I think it's really going to allow us to take a look at how much we've changed. How much clearer and in more integrity are you in how you use your voice, what you speak about, what you think about, and how you manage those relationships with siblings. And you also mentioned other people. Neighbors are part of that third house. And I think of the relationships of the third house as all the people that we didn't really choose. We don't choose our neighbors, we don't choose our siblings, we don't choose who it is we have to interact with, I don't know, at the grocery store or the post office, whatever. These are all relationships that are significant in some way, and yet we don't choose them. So these are serious relationships, and pay attention to how your communications develop through those relationships as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
we'll move on then. We'll move on to
Said Scorpio
oh,
rising.
what?
Moving on to Sagittarius rising.
Sagittarius rising. Okay, so if you've got Sagittarius rising, this is putting the focus of the Capricorn season into your second house. So let's talk about the second house. Second house it's an interesting house, aren't they all? Second house is really about our self-worth, our self-esteem, how we value ourselves, and how that is connected as well to money, resources. These things are so tied together, and I probably sound like a broken record if you've listened to me a lot, that, it's really clear how those things go together if you think about what happens to your self-esteem if there's no money in the bank. If you're worried about how you're going to buy your groceries, your self-esteem really suffers in that way. So that's kind of what I think of with the second house. If you've got Sagittarius rising, you kind of approach the world with a pretty optimistic energy. You're a pretty optimistic, upbeat person. But when it comes to your own self-worth and your own management of finances and resources, this is an area where you really hold a lot of seriousness, and you really have to pay attention to issues of integrity in this area. How do you work with your money? How do you spend it? How do you make it? Is there integrity in all those things? It's really important. At the beginning part of this season, there's kind of a lighter tone to this area. Obviously, as we're moving into Capricorn season, it's a time of year when a lot of people spend a lot of money. So this might be really more important for you to be paying attention to than a lot of people, the money issue. Um, there's been so much change in this area as the season ends, as this season ends, you're going to really have the opportunity to really see how much you've changed in terms of your self-worth and possibly in terms of how money flows in and out of your life as well.
Yeah, I think it's important during this Capricorn season too, or any Capricorn season, but really just to recognize that. I mean, I kind of think Capricorn in the second house, it's kind of like the keywords for that might be something like fruitful challenge. And
Mm,
I'm saying that because what it might be is that a struggle with self-worth, a struggle with those values as a younger person, and that as you age and you start to recognize your value, you start to recognize the resources that you can make available to other people. And with Capricorn in the second house, like, you got a lot of resources to help other people. You're very like stable and structured here. Like, you can really help other people figure out their money stuff.
mhm.
It's kind of like this longer term view. So during this Capricorn season, you're getting another go round of like, what's being highlighted, where am I at now in life, like where am I, how am I doing with the way I value myself and the things that you've already mentioned, Laurie.
Mhm.
And I think that again, there's a shift ahead, as we've been talking about towards the end of the season, where you really want to, I don't know, almost say, hey, how have I done in this part of my life? And be able to kind of go, I'm pretty good. I mean, that's
Mm.
what you're aiming for, and if you're not pretty good, I would say just see what you have done well, like find the brighter spots in there, because you're getting to move into a new direction. And by the end of the season, there's going to be this kind of, hey, everybody needs to focus forwards. You're going to have been able to say, I've done all this different work in this area, and now it's all systems go. And so you're going to want to be ready to move ahead, and also just say, hey, if I left some things undone, I left some things undone. But you're going to really want to be in that forward direction. So,
And the
um,
reality is Pluto's going to dip back in there for a short period of time next year.
this is a longer process. But anyway, all right. Cool.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to folks who have Capricorn rising.
Yeah, so when I see Capricorn rising, there's a few folks in my life who have this. And Capricorn rising people are the ones that walk in the room and people take, them seriously. They're like, who's that? Whether they're 10 years old or 70 years old, that tends to be what happens with that Capricorn rising. It was really interesting. So during Capricorn season, every year you are showing up as the authority. There's a highlight on that part of your chart where you're walking in the room and it's like, ooh, there's somebody serious just walked in the room. So I don't know how you feel about that. Think about that for yourself. But at any rate, every single time this season comes around, you're getting an opportunity to really look at yourself and be like, am I a person who sticks with my word? Am I a person who says what I mean and then follows through on what I'm saying? Am I that person? And if you're like, yes, great, keep doing that, keep working with that, work with that through this whole Capricorn season. If you're saying, oh, not so sure, that's okay. You get more and more opportunities to work with this as the cycle of life. So stick with those questions, and then notice that maybe earlier on in this season, it's a little more lighthearted. We still have some planets in Sagittarius. Saturn's making some nice aspects in the beginning. So it's a little more chatty and social and outwardly focused. And then once we hit that first week in January, there's going to be a real need to kind of buckle down and get serious and really think about the direction you want your life to take, especially with Capricorn rising. Where do you want to go? What do you want to see? Because you kind of need to bring some things to a close and move into a new direction coming up at the very end of the season. So that is unusual about this season. Like, that's not normal. We don't normally have Pluto going into a brand new sign on the day that Capricorn season ends. And we have Pluto going into Aquarius. So at that time, you really want to be on point for kind of moving something forwards in a whole new way.
Yeah. For those of you with Capricorn rising, you have been changed on a really deep level over the last 3 or 4 years. There's been so much in Capricorn, and Capricorn is so personal for you. It is all about you. And this Capricorn season, yeah, the focus is on your personality, how you present yourself, how you show up in the world. And I always remember, some of my early learning about Capricorn rising around, people with Capricorn rising, there's such a maturity demanded of them from a very early age. And you mentioned in one of the other ones, Jennie, the whole idea of wherever Capricorn is, you're old when you're young and you're young when you're old. And I think that is particularly a nice thing for people to think about who have Capricorn rising, because as you get older, you really do settle more into being who you are. As a young person with Capricorn rising, there's just a lot demanded of you, a lot of maturity demanded of you way before you're ready. And there is just, as you mature, you kind of take on that because it feels more normal for you. So there's a lot of change in your personality over these last couple of years. And as Pluto does get out of that house, you're going to, I feel like there's just going to be such a deep ability to accept yourself in a way that has been difficult to do in recent years because of the deep level of changes going on. But yeah, a new level of acceptance of yourself as the authority, as the one who, when you walk in a room, people notice. And how they notice it is that your very presence demands respect. And yes, you need to bring your life to a point where you are really worthy of that respect.
Mm.
And I think, you've been working that hard over the last few years. And now I feel like it's really coming to a point of accepting that in yourself. That's really beautiful. I like that.
Nice. And that's
Oh,
great.
okay. We will move on then to folks who have Pisces rising. Oh, wait, did I go the wrong direction?
No, we're Aquarius rising. We're on
Oh,
first.
I'm sorry. I'm rushing things. Whew. I was going to skip over Aquarius altogether.
You got this.
Okay. All right. Okay. If you've got Aquarius rising, this puts the focus of the Capricorn season in your 12th house. Okay. The 12th house is really, it's what's hidden away. It's what we don't have easy access to in our day-to-day life. The 12th house is our unconscious processes. We can think of it as our unconscious psychological processes and patterns behind the scenes. We can also think of it as the area where, spirituality is hidden back there as well. With Capricorn in this area, there's really a serious energy in that area. You really, over the past years, with all that's been going on in this area, you've probably done some real deep dives into understanding yourself on that subterranean level of really developing an understanding of how those internal patterns control your life or support your life, whatever it may be. So I think as far as the issue of integrity, what you're really looking at is, are you in integrity with your own inner search, your own inner spiritual growth, psychological understanding? Have you done the work that you need to do? And I suspect that over the last couple of years, you've probably done a lot of that work. Possibly you've done it kicking and screaming. Possibly you've done it very joyfully. I don't know, but it's been a process. At the end of this season, there is a powerful suggestion that you will really gain an understanding of how much work you've done and really be able to see it and begin to grasp the rewards of that work.
I was thinking, if you have Aquarius rising, I'm just picturing that the holidays might be kind of tough because it's, around this time every year, the sun moves into Capricorn, and every year it highlights this very private, solo place that's kind of tucked away where you might just want to tuck away and meditate, or go off on your own and climb a mountain and then sit and soak in the spa. I mean, that to me is kind of like what the impetus is that is suggested by Aquarius rising, by having Capricorn in the 12th house. And that's how you restore yourself. That's how you restore your ability to really move mountains, to be serious in your life, is by going in and doing this inner work. So I'm just picturing that the holidays could be a pretty tough time for folks with this, at least in the lead up. And again, it depends on what your tradition is and who you hang out with. Maybe you figure this out for yourself and you just don't do it. You don't deal with people at the holidays. Who knows? But what I can say is that this Capricorn season definitely is like, all right, if you can get through the first two parts, and try to enjoy it. I'm sorry, the first 2 weeks. Just try to enjoy it, relax into it, allow the social time, because your Aquarius rising can also handle that. But the second half is really that opportunity to just go in and have some dark and some silence and some quiet, and really adopt the hermit behavior of Capricorn, and allow yourself that time and just embrace it, because astrology suggested it's probably going to be a great way for you to restore. And then look, when you're doing that, what are the adjustments that you might need to make, because there's certainly a direction change ahead. So think about that, and then through the rest of the season, just make sure that you are doing what you need to do to calm your system, calm your nervous system in particular, because at the very end there is a pretty dramatic change, because Pluto is going to go back into Aquarius, as we mentioned in the beginning of this video. And for you, Aquarius rising, that means Pluto is going into your first house again. So, wow, I mean, this is a potent time. So it is extra important that you do that restorative work for yourself this year. And then as we move into Aquarius season on January 20th, there is going to be a big shift for you. That is a big changeover. Whether or not you feel it, that depends on you. But I can tell you it's happening, even if it's, really hidden underground. So anyway, that's what you're really preparing for. And that's why it's extra important to take care of yourself. In that way, psychologically and beyond.
Yeah. A lot of importance around self-care.
Yeah.
Emotional self-care, not so much physical, but just taking care of your internal being. That's important stuff. Oh, and these people are in for a big shift in their lives. All that work that they've been doing behind the scenes, I think is really going to change how they approach the world and how they show up in a big way over the next couple of years. Anyway, on we go to folks with Pisces rising.
Okay, so Pisces rising, you have Capricorn in the 11th house. So Capricorn season is bringing the 11th house to mind. The 11th house is community. So this can play out in a number of different ways. Community, we always talk about that as the community that supports you. And I'm always thinking about that example of going into a yoga class, and you may not know the people in the class, but you're practicing yoga together and you support each other in that practice just by showing up. So it's a really good example. So think about Pisces rising, what is your community? Who are the groups of people? Some of them could be groups of friends, but it isn't just that. It's all of these other entities that really support you. And with Capricorn here, like, you're pretty serious about your community. It's really important to you that you have that. So I think the big question that Capricorn season can bring to you is, are you in integrity in how you deal with your community? Like, are you open to receiving the support your community has to offer you? And are you following through in that community? Like, are you showing up and are you doing the things? Because Capricorn is very concerned with, if you say something, you're going to do it, and that you're going to follow through. And Capricorn prioritizes that sort of behavior. So that's what you're going to want to look at and think about during Capricorn season. And for the first part of the season, the first couple weeks, there's a suggestion that it's going to be probably lighter hearted, a little more social. I mean, it is the holidays after all, a little more chatty and interactive. And then after we get through the new year, and Mercury stations direct and all that, there's going to be an opportunity for you to really settle down, slow down, go within, really dig in and question yourself about this community piece. Like, who are those people? Who is supporting you? Because I can tell you that there's a change coming, and you may need to make some little directional shifts during, especially that balsamic moon week, of the first week of January there. So that's what you're going to want to work on, because the shift that's going to come is going to be profound. It's going to shift your attention into deeper topics rather than just community. It's going to take you into a deeper place. So that's what really might have your attention during Capricorn season.
Yeah, and I think about that shift that you're talking about. What it makes me think of is over the last few years, there's been so much going on in this area of Capricorn, in your 11th house, that, when this shift comes, you're going to really be able to look and see what is the work that I've done in this area and how is it going to support me as this big shift changes and I go way into a much deeper area of myself. How is the community going to be able to continue supporting me because of the work I've done over these last few years? So, think about that. I think there's going to be a lot of clarity available for the work that we've done in the area where Capricorn is in our charts. And, for you with Pisces rising, that 11th house, we talk about it as community. It's such an interesting house to think about, because back when I was first studying astrology, how the 11th house was often talked about as the house of hopes and dreams and wishes. I remember thinking about that. I remember being very confused by the 11th house for years. But it's really, it's what you desire for the future. It's the people that support you to that. That's where community comes in. It's the people that support you to what you desire. So at this time, really paying attention. What is that community? Think about it. It might be, like Jennie has said, it might be your yoga class, because it's not likely to be your best friends. Some of your friends may be part of that community, but this isn't, a group of your very best friends. This is like-minded people who support you. They don't necessarily need to know you. It might be the yoga class. It might be the, I don't know, PTA. I don't even know if that still exists. I don't know. It could be many things, but think about what your desires are for the future and the like-minded people that support you to that. And that's the area that's really being focused on here.
I guess one other thing I was just popping in my head about the 11th house is, I mean, it is next to the 10th house. The 10th house is your career and profession, and you often meet lots of people through your work, and you network with people, and you do all these things. So then it makes sense to me it's nested right next to the 11th house, because there's a lot of crossover where it could also be, sometimes the 11th house is groups of people at work, like if you're in charge of a committee or something at work. So there's a lot of different ways. So, get your head around which one that is and let yourself really work with those pieces, take that time of solitude and understand where you want to go in this area of your life.
Yeah.
So
big change is coming for sure. Okay. I think we've gone through it all.
We have.
Wow.
Okay.
That was fun, huh?
Yeah.
Hey, did
Yes.
you see my sunflowers?
Yes. They look like Van Gogh.
I just
Van Gogh painting.
love having sunflowers in my house. It makes me super happy this time of year.
Oh, awesome.
God
Love it.
knows where they grew. Anyway, all right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jenny.
Thank you,
This has
Laurie.
been awesome. We'll do another one soon.
Thanks, folks.